I guess I'd like to particularly welcome Jack Cornish, who's with us from the Ramblers, to talk to us about some of the work that they've been doing. And also we've got Councillor Ian Huddleston, who is our new, returning member representative as well. So, yeah, great to see you back. Thank you. I see. For the Peak District National Park. So, Mike, have you got apologies?
Yes. Unfortunately, we have quite a number of apologies, which is a shame. And we've got... Pardon? I think it's just firing up.
Do you want to use mine?
Yeah, it's giving off strange... yes, we have a number of apologies, which is a bit of a shame, particularly Jill Millward, who was given her apologies this morning. I think she's unwell. We also have apologies from Councillor Susan Hobson, Charlotte Leach, Austin Knott, Alistair Harvey, Joe Dalton, Jess Kenyon. And we're expecting 3 others that might be late. Craig.
Paul definitely said that he was coming. So, yeah, hopefully.
So let's just see. They might come at the last minute. Otherwise, it's a bit of a short turnout, I'm afraid, which is a bit of a shame. There we are.
Okay. Thank you. First item is minutes of our last meeting in June. Hello, Paul. So minutes of our last meeting in June. Everybody presumably has received those. Has anybody got any comments or corrections that they want to make just before I go through matters arising? Martin.
Chair, just on item 8, just the last paragraph, it refers to a Middleton footpath. It's actually a Hopton footpath, which I'm going to refer to later in a few minutes.
Well
so Hopton footpath.
Will you guys make that correction, Mike?
I can find it. Item 8.
Derbyshire CC Rowett update. Also paragraph, Martin referred back to the discussion.
You see that? Where are we? Item 8. DCC's Rowett update. Oh, Martin referred to the discussion of IG earlier. Was the weekend advisor?
Okay.
Hopton.
Thank you.
Noted.
Any others? Great. Thank you. So we'll accept those as a accurate record of the meeting once that correction's been made. Yeah. Thank you. Next item is matters arising from the last meeting. So I'll just go through each sort of item by number. I've got a few things that I'll just update on. If anyone else has got anything to update on, let me know. So the first is the Transport Symposium. And I know that the post of the Sustainable Transport Officer has been advertised. Do we know if has that been...
Yeah, it's been, I think the person starts next week or next
Oh,
week.
brilliant. Okay.
Yeah.
So that someone's starting in that role this year.
Starting that role next week, I think, yeah.
Okay. So we'll hopefully invite them to a future meeting, either February or June, as they sort of settle in. Fantastic. And then we had discussion on elms and access to water. I know there's been lots going on, but unless Charlotte or Ben, you want to update on anything, we can come back to that at the end of the meeting. Okay. National Park Management Plan. I think have we heard any update on sort of that? So I think Charlotte and I are going to try to meet with Phil Mulligan if we can at some point sort of in the new year, maybe to have a chat about that and the role of the LAF. Car parking charges. I know the machines have now gone in and they're about to start charging at Stanage and Burbage, so I'm assuming that's the case across the park. So that's the set of car parks that were free where charges have been introduced, and then I think the actual charge itself has been raised across the park. So I know at Stanage we're going to keep an eye on the impact of that in terms of parking outside the paid areas, parking on the verges, and whether that has any impacts in terms of access and nature, sort of damage to verges, etc. So I'll report back on that if there's anything to say. Is there anything else under item 3 from last time? Item 4, which was proposed changes to the LAF meetings.
That'll be covered in Andy's presentation.
Okay, so we'll come back to that in Andy's section later. We did have a discussion about looking into IT solutions for keeping LAF discussions going between meetings, which we haven't progressed as a kind of standalone. We were going to look at things like SharePoint and potential other platforms. All of those would need to be supported with internal officer support, and obviously with everything happening in the authority over the summer, we haven't really looked at those. We did do one thing I wanted to ask under this was, we did look at the Moscow Cross TRO response using email, which certainly from my perspective, I got a load of really good responses and was able to put a response together that I was sort of happy had been supported by members of the LAF who wanted to comment. Was everybody happy with that process? Any comments on that from that perspective of the people who did or didn't respond?
I think it seemed to work pretty well, really, didn't it?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Charlotte?
I thought it worked well, and people were able to voice their opinions, and you were able to consider everything and reflect it in your response.
Okay, great. So I think I'll continue to do that for anything that comes in, but we can also continue to look at whether there are other ways that, so now that we're meeting less often, we can keep in touch and make sure that we're reflecting LAF views on things that where we're being asked for our opinion. Just going through, so we had a presentation or a speaker from the Green Lanes Alliance, and we'll come back to the Green Lanes strategy under Andy's section later on as well. And Access for All we'll come back to under Sue's access update later on. Anything anybody wants to update on under that section? Just moving down through that. We were going to send a letter to Staffordshire County Council about asking for an update on the Swan and Lima rakes, but I believe we had a response from Staffordshire before that letter was sent, and so we didn't feel the need to do so. Is that correct? There was an update from Staffordshire on what they were actually doing. Sue's nodding. Richard?
Yeah, I went there a few weeks ago and we were still working on site.
Okay.
There's a lot of security fencing up. I don't know exactly how far they've got, but it's still looked like they're cracking on.
Okay. So yeah, so the work's underway basically on the route. Thank you. The ROIP and the Derbyshire County Council Maintenance Programme will come back to under Jill's item, which I think Mike is going to do for us. Anything else or any other matters arising from the minutes that anybody wants to note or talk about here? Okay, great. Thank you.
Sorry, I should have mentioned at the beginning of the meeting that Ben's going to have to pop out, aren't you, Ben? So, could you just give us your timings of when you're going? You're going out at 12:15. So we can make sure we get Ben's update before then.
Is he? Okay, yes. We'll force you to say something before then. You don't have to.
We always look forward to your update, Ben. We don't want to miss it. We don't want to miss it. You want to stick your oar in.
Panicked face. This to be our new approach to the LAF. We'll just point at someone and say, update at 11:45, and they'll have to think of something. Okay.
See how we get on.
That's great, thank you. So with no further ado, I'll move on to item 4, which is a presentation from Jack Cornish at the Ramblers. Jack, I will let you introduce yourself and your job title and your role. And but yeah, thank you very much for coming up to join us. We've managed to organise some nice weather for you.
I know, it's beautiful, and the autumn colours and everything. It's been,
Great.
So
Quite a lot.
Press your forward thing there.
Yep.
To move on. Are we on?
Yep.
Yep.
perfect.
Okay, off you go.
Great. I've got quite a few slides, so hopefully I won't stand in the way too much. Maybe if I... Well,
Mike, do you want to stick those two mics on as well?
Yeah, so thanks for inviting me today. So I'm Jack Cornish. I've got the sort of slightly grand title of Head of Paths at the Ramblers. And I'll sort of explain a bit about what that is and what the team does. But mainly today I'm going to talk about some of the research that we've done about the Public Rights of Way network, primarily focused in England and Wales, but we've also done some slightly wider research, which I've sort of talked you through today, hopefully. So as a team, this seems to have squashed slightly, but yeah, as a team, there's 5 of us in 6 of us in the PATHs team, and we support, at the Ramblers, we support about 4,500 PATH volunteers. So as a wider organisation, we've got about 20,000 volunteers, but specifically on PATHs, about 4,500. And the sort of areas that we work on, which will be very familiar to many of you in the room, are supporting, we have a network of area and group for PATH officers, so we support those, and we have also as statutory consultees to any change to the network. I think we get about 1,200 of those a year. We have 150 PATH maintenance teams primarily across England and Wales. We also have a PATH accessibility fund, which is a fund of money that we're funding to create more accessible whole stretches of paths across England and Wales as well. If you've got any projects that might meet that as well, I know that as being protected landscape, there's other funding, but you know we're looking to spend more of that funding to create more accessible paths. We also have our project Don't Use Your Way, which is supporting. We've got about 900 volunteers now that are doing historical research to apply for lost paths to go back on the map, but also we support members of the public and our volunteers and our members with applications to add paths to the map through user evidence, and we've just got a new guide on that if you're interested. And then we have a significant part of our work is advice and casework. We're not just, especially in my team, we're not necessarily focused on our members. We're focused on supporting the public with issues they come across in paths and understanding the path network. So we get about just under 2,000 inquiries a year, members of the public, and we also we run training and we produce whole lots of guidance and support for anything to do with public rights of way or paths and access. We also, as an organisation, within the team, take about 20 maybe legal cases a year. That can be everything from a letter, pre-action letter, to High Court, Supreme Court around issues around access. And then we've got an important role in championing the network and making sure it gets support in the long term, and that's sort of really what I'm talking about today. So, why did we undertake this research? And I'll tell you what it is in a minute, but why did we undertake it? So, at the Ramblers, we really wanted, as I think as I've sort of shown, we do a lot on paths, and it's really paths and access are in our DNA for the last sort of 90 years, really. But we really wanted to understand, what are the issues with our path network, and what is the long-term vision for sort of getting a better path network for everyone. So this research is part of a wider project, which involves also talking to lots of different groups, not just within the Ramblers, but across the country, some other research, talking to our volunteers as well, that really wanted to formulate what is our long-term vision for the path network and how can that be achieved. So, I mean, some of the vision statement is sort of by really, but we want a path network that's open for everyone to enjoy and where paths connect people and places across Britain. Really underneath that, we've got about 24 recommendations to achieve that. Some of that is national legislation. Some of that is work that the Ramblers needs to do. Some of it is other partner organisations. So I just wanted to sort of contextualise this as part of a much larger piece of work. I don't know why this has got cut off, but we also wanted to understand the value of the Public Rights of Way network so we can make the case for long-term investment, support and legislation. And we really believe that the public rights of way network is often overlooked critical national infrastructure. And also we want to, you know, in the same way that we're doing some of the stuff with the Path Accessibility Fund, which is relatively, you know, about £20,000 a year. It's not the biggest fund at the moment. We want to do much more targeted work that would have the biggest impact. So the research will help us, you know, target our work and do additional projects that would have the biggest impact on communities. So we commissioned a think tank called the New Economics Foundation. They're a very sort of established think tank, and they produced 2 reports for us. I think together they're about 95 pages. It's quite a lot of detail, and they're quite academic in some ways, but we wanted it to be a robust research report. You can download these from our website. There's also some summary of some of the stats as well if you haven't got the time to read 90 pages, but I would encourage you to, you know, to sort of at least have a flick through them. And I wanted to sort of share some of the insights from that. So what we did essentially is we collected data on the public rights of way network for about 98.5% of the land area of the country. There are some local authorities missing. We excluded Greater London, partly because there are no definitive maps in Inner London, and a lot of the Greater London ones hadn't got a digitised path network at all. And then we also, well, when I say we, this is all the New Economics Foundation with our support, collected a whole load of demographic data, so deprivation, age, ethnicity, income, heart attack prevalence, mental health indices, but also house building age as well. So sort of, I suppose that's not quite demographic, but it's another key piece of information. And we essentially analysed where are our paths in relation to some of these demographic data down to neighbourhood levels. So that's the lower super output area, which is a census area. So that's about every 1,500 to 2,500 people. So quite small areas. And then we also brought in a whole load of landscape data. So things like national parks, nature reserves, and access land, but also Natural England's work on greenness indices, and different landscape types like agricultural, urban, rural, lots of things like that. And then, so, I mean, there's some sort of headline stuff around, you know, so, for instance, I just thought this is just one table in the report, but, you know, public rights of way, so almost 11% of public rights of way are in national parks in England and Wales. That's what that might be of interest. That's in England and Wales. In Wales itself, it's almost 18%, and in England it's just under 10%. So I just thought, but you can. This is just a sort of introductory bit. It's not really, but you know, just to give you sort of where public rights of way are. We also looked at access land. So this is a map of access land plus the National Forestry Inventory, because we, the Ramblers, are making the case for expanded open access, and especially in woodlands. So this is just one of the maps. I'm just giving a flavour of some of the support. And then this is those down to those neighbourhood levels. This is public rights of way within a 10-minute walk of people's houses. So essentially, what we did is we calculated for every single postcode in the country within a 10-minute walk, what length of public rights of way do you have? And then those were aggregated to those 1,200 to 2,500 people neighbourhoods. So this is gives you a really patchy way. Obviously, you can see here there's some real disparities, and not necessarily where you'd expect it. Some of it, I think there are, you know, there's sort of fenland area and drained area maybe, but Devon's quite stark there. Interestingly, that Devon is where we found, separately we've got a whole database of lost rights of way that we identified from the old maps, and Devon has the most lost rights of way as well, so there's an interesting. Yeah, and then this is just a snapshot. You can see this is Merseyside, again, centre of Liverpool, not unexpected, and actually our solution to something like that isn't new public rights of way. You can't, you know, you can't really create those in the same way, but even when you go up the coast to somewhere like Sefton, Southport, you know, the access to the countryside is not as good as you expect it to be. We've also got these snapshots, and I can send these through if it's for the different constituents. Basically, these are what we've giving our volunteers at the moment, because there's 180 of them for all the local authorities. This is Derbyshire. So the map here is that 10-minute walk within, and so you can see doing pretty well. But we've got all of these different, you won't be able to see them, but we've got all these different indicators. So length of public rights of way within 20-minute walk, continuous rights of way over 3 kilometres. So that's, are the roads of way network lots of little alleyways, or is it longer route? And there's methodology behind what we mean by continuous. So if it crosses a road, that we sort of see that as continuous. But if it's completely separate, then we don't. Green rights of way, so that's if the right of way is green or not, and that's within a 10 and 20-minute walk. Percentage of rights of way that's green. We've also got lost rights of way. Length of right of way next or in a natural England nature-rich zone, so that's things like nature reserves, triple SIs, etc. Distance to access land of a particular site that at least has one right of way connecting it. So you can see there's a lot of data here, and yeah. So I won't go through all the stats now, but so this, for instance, so this is just for 3 areas. So Derbyshire, Sheffield, and Staffordshire. This is the same one. This is the public rights of way within a 10-minute walk. Again, Derbyshire doing well. Sheffield, some of it doing well, and quite a mixed picture in Staffordshire. This is the lost rights of way within a 10-minute walk. So Derbyshire doing well, this one, but also there's some areas with potential lost rights of way. Now, whether that's a priority, considering this, I don't know, but there's an interesting thing there. And again, some different landscapes might be that matters less. So when you've got open access land, maybe it matters less if you've got. But public rights of way still offer access points, etc. Just if you're interested, the black means we haven't calculated that because that is buffering an area that we don't have the data, so it means that the data is less robust. We also have got a partnership with Strava. I think people might use the Strava app. So we've got all of their data for about the last 10 years across the country, where people hike, run, walk, cycle, etc. So there's a whole section of the report that goes into some case study areas where we've done analysis of where are people moving on foot, and how does that relate to the public rights of way? Which paths are they using, which aren't they using? So the case study areas are Devon and Dorset, West and South Yorkshire, West Midlands, and South East Wales. So this is from Wales, for instance. And the blue on here are Strava routes. So you can see loads of them are people running on the streets or walking on the streets. The red is a buffer around public rights of way, because obviously people don't quite exactly stick to the. So you can see that there's quite a few public rights of way being used here. There's also quite a few routes that aren't public rights of way, and that would be interesting for us. If this was an area of lack of access, we would be thinking, should that be a new public right of way there? Is there a reason, but there's also some public rights of way that are not being used at all, that don't have a single journey marked on Strava.
What's Strava?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Strava is like an app that you can record your runs or your walks, and so it creates so basically all of these are thousands of people's journeys, really. Sorry, I should have explained that. Yeah, so but there are paths that are not being used at all. That's a public right way there that hasn't had a single journey on it. So you can see where we start to target some more work now. So there's a lot of sort of granular analysis, but also some big takeaway headlines. So using quite established methods of sort of well-being methods, and again, read the report for all of the full sort of academic rigour to it. But essentially, with the report authors found that just in terms of health and well-being, our public rights of way network contributes £1.8 billion a year to the country in England. It's about £32 per person. It's not, I imagine, getting £32 of investment a year, for instance. And again, we know that some of this is not. It's not necessarily saying we can do this or we would want to do this, but it it uses those academic sort of structures to say that if a doubling of local neighbourhood provision of public rights of way leads to a 6.2 increase in people visiting green space every week. Now that might sound low, but it equates to nearly, or to 85 million annual visits to green space every year, and then that feeds back into the health and wellbeing benefit. And again, the report talks about where it looks like lost rights of way, for instance. It says if you could save all of these lost rights of way in this area, it would bring this amount of health and wellbeing value to these parts of the country. So there's a lot of detail in there. We also, to support this, undertook some polling through YouGov. And just we haven't really released many of these stats, but I thought some of them might be interesting. So 83% of people agreed that the path network is a national asset. 85% of people agreed that it should be protected for future generations. Only half of people surveyed said they knew their rights and responsibilities when out walking on the path network. And about almost a third of the respondents said that one of the main reasons they don't go out walking on the path network is because they don't know where the paths are or where they go. So there's an information gap there, I think, as well. So that was about 1,200 people in England, Scotland, and Wales. But we also surveyed about just over 1,000 people across GB with physical and sensory disabilities to see what the differences were. So this is, I think, quite a sort of startling or maybe unsurprising but interesting stat. So again, we said, why don't you use the paths? And the question was, physical barriers stop me from using the path network. 24% of people in England, 28% of people in Wales, 22% of people in Scotland, but 56% of people with a physical or sensory disability. So there's, this is an area that the Ramblers want to do much more on to sort of open up the network for more people. So what comes next? So we're going to be looking at using more of that sort of movement data. As I said, the analysis so far is focused in those case study areas, but we want to do more with that data and understand, because there's, we literally, Strava say that about 1 in 7 people in the country use their app, so it's quite a lot of data there. We do recognise there's demographic bias in that data, because you're more likely to be sort of younger, richer, urban based when you're using it, but because of that large number, you can get statistical significance from it and see where people are using paths and where they're not. As I said, we want to use some of the data to target our work nationally and locally. So I'm already talking to our volunteers. So these maps about the sort of differences in access locally, how can that be used, for instance, in a rights of way improvement plan? Could that be used in a rights of way improvement plan? You identify these are the poorest communities that have the least access across a county. Can there be extra work? And then maybe bringing in the Strava data, you could really start to see how that comes together. I just wanted to mention another thing, actually, just so one other stat that I haven't got on the slide, but I thought this was particularly interesting. We looked at, so one of those demographics was around like income. And I suppose, so unsurprisingly, there is a correlation between maybe higher income and access to rights of way, because there's obviously a large chunk of that is urban rural, right? And so people, richer people generally live in the countryside, but even then, even in rural areas, the 15% less, if you're poorer, you are 15% less likely to have access to public rights of way than if you're richer. So there's something there as well. And also, one other thing I wish I'd sort of shared, but I could maybe send it around afterwards, there's a really fantastic graph in the presentation of house building age to public rights of way access. And essentially, starts about 1900, and well, pre-1900, and then I think by every 20 years from then. And it shows that in urban areas, middle of the 20th century, quite high provision of public rights of way for where we're building houses, but it goes down into millennium onwards, especially. It goes down, but in rural areas, the difference is even starker. So essentially, if you're in a house that's built post millennium, in a rural area, you're significantly less likely to have access to public rights of way with a 10-minute walk. So I'm sure that's some of the things that you know the new development on the edge of a town or on the village that doesn't have good access into the town on safe ways, but also have they got access to public rights of way beyond. So there's a really interesting thing there, and I can send that around afterwards. We also recognise that a lot of the stuff I've been talking about today is about provision, legal provision. That's obviously only one part of the picture. You can have fantastic provision on paper, but if it's blocked, if it's in really poor condition, if you don't know where it is, or if it's inaccessible to you, that's a big issue. And we are one of the other things next. So we'll be focusing on we'll be doing more on quality, condition, and accessibility, but also as I said, we want this to make the case for our paths. And the Ramblers are working with other access organisations. We're calling for a new Access to Nature bill, which again I can send around a blog that has some of the key points on that. But essentially there's things in there like expanding where open access land is, but also there's a lot of talk at the moment about right to roam, and I think paths get missed out of that, especially their sort of practical and pragmatic importance to people accessing the countryside. So there's a lot in what we're calling for in Access to Nature bill, for instance, bringing back quality standards for paths, having the need for long-term strategies and investment plans for our path network in every nation, and there's lots of other stuff in there as well. I think we can do more to make our paths more accessible through legislation as well. There is not necessarily saying around here, but there's certain parts of the country where there's hundreds of styles that haven't seen a cow or a sheep for 50 years or more. So is there something we can do to challenge that? So yeah, I can send around that if that's of interest afterwards. But I think that's everything from me. If anyone's got any questions.
Thank you very much. Wow, loads to
Sorry, I
think
know there's a
about
lot there.
Open for questions, comments, discussion. Claire was first, and then Charlotte.
I was going to say, wow, Tim, that was amazing.
Your microphone's not on, I don't think. Oh, can you? Ooh. Oh, hang on. Try that. Oh, use that one.
I was going to say wow as well. That was just amazing. That data set's just amazing, isn't it? It's so rich, and you can just slice it so many ways. I guess what I want to say is, first of all, that was phenomenal, and I think it's really telling that in this group, we've been talking about the financial restrictions on local authorities and the financial restrictions on park authorities, and the necessary kind of sort of limiting of the services, closing of ranger officers, and it's fantastic that the Ramblers are kind of there's an unmet need there that the Ramblers are stepping in to fill, and I think that's absolutely brilliant. And I guess my question was, I think that link with the Strava heat map is absolutely genius, for the unmet way, the lost ways, but also, just as you say, finding out places where there aren't rights of way, but perhaps should be because they're getting a lot of use. I wondered if there's a way of using that, Strava heat map to direct where you need to give advice. For example, I bet if you look at the Strava heat map out of Wasdale, the track up to Scafell Pike is, and you're kind of like, you could just go up Kirkfell. It's just as nice. So I guess that's my question. Are you going to sort of use that Strava data to direct people and advise?
Yeah, I think we could. There's so many different ways we could use it, and to some extent, I haven't got a big plan of all of them, if you know what I mean. But there's so many ways. It's also worth saying that. Again, I don't know if this is appropriate, but the national park could also be a partner of Strava and get access to that data as well. They're very open to new partners, and so it's Strava Metro, so it's their not-for-profit sort of side of them, and they're keen for new partners. So you could get access to that data as well, and slice it and dice it, and you can see. Especially because you can see cycling as well. So, there's a whole range of stuff there, and you can see over time. And there's I could go on about the Strava data set, but when you get into the dashboard, you can do things like, and I think this might be really interesting for you guys, you can do things like, in this particular part of the country, you know, particular area of land, where do the Strava trips start and end? And so you can sort of start to do things like about which parts are most popular for people that don't live in the area, and which areas are most popular for people that do live in it. So you can do a whole different analysis. I mean, it's a massive data set. So yeah. I have a look at it if you're interested. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think Sue just wanted to make a comment on Strava, and then I'll come to you, Charlotte.
Hi. The national parks have partnered with Strava, and it is really exciting. You know, some of the opportunities that you've just outlined there, we're already looking at. But we've also been using the heat maps to look at management on the ground. So where we need to put signposts in, but also as where people are wanting to go, the attractions they're wanting to go, and working with landowners to see if we can take them there. But we're going to be looking with all the national parks access officers in a couple of weeks' time, looking at all the different forms of digital mapping and data, and I'll be picking up with Jack about that as well.
We can. You know, I'm very happy, especially with, you know, partners like yourselves, to share the data as well. You know, we're sorting out data sharing agreement stuff at the moment, but you know, very happy to do that as well. And I think with the Strava thing, it would be great at some point for some of the different partners across the country to sort of come together and talk about how they're using it and stuff like that. But, yeah.
Thank you. Charlotte.
Yeah, what a fantastic piece of work, and thank you to you and your team for doing that. I mean, that will just influence so many people. I could talk to you for hours about this, but yes. So I've been involved with Lost Ways from a horse riding perspective. So I think originally a lot of the work that was being done by Ramblers and other associated working groups were looking at footpaths. I understand now that where you're doing research, that you look at higher rights as well. So rather than just claiming a footpath, if it is a bridleway or restricted byway, then you will put that in. On the new build access, there's been a lot of new building in and around Buxton, which, although not within the national park, is part of the remit of this LAF. And it's been shocking that there are no provisions for non-motorised travel into Buxton. There's a very active group within Buxton called Buxton Town Team, and they're trying to get people on foot and on bikes and move out into the wider network. So there's a lot of work being done in that area, but it should be part of every planning application that we should be able to do sustainable travel, and it's a shame that it's not. And then the final thing is, I've just been on holiday in Italy and I've been walking in the Dolomites, and I noticed on the maps they numbered the footpaths. And so when you come to a finger post, it's got footpath 6 pointing off in the direction. And as you walk along, you'll come across little white squares painted on things with the number on. I found it very, very easy to travel, and I just wondered whether that's something that perhaps could be looked at, because we have got parish path numbers, and whether that would help give people confidence. You can set off on a footpath from the road and it says footpath to Stony Middleton. You can set off on that and then you are just abandoned. And I just wondered if there's some way that this could, you know, they were discreet. I don't want a proliferation of signs, and whether that be something that we could look at.
I think the information bit is one of the bits that is, I mean, it's all interesting, but like, how do we, you know, some of the YouGov polling that we did around knowing where the paths are and where they go, how do we actually, it's one of the toughest ones to challenge, to know what an off-the-shelf solution to that is. And yeah, I think that could be an idea. I mean, we also ask questions about, well, how do you know where you can go walking, and how do you find out where to go walking? And perhaps unsurprisingly, Google Maps was the first thing that people came up with. And so, you know, like, I mean, Ordnance Survey was there, but it's, you know, so there's also a sort of technology challenge and a challenge with, you know, I was talking to someone from Google Maps, and they're saying that, you know, people younger than me, and the young, you know, the sort of people in their 20s, they're using it, and they just follow the blue lines, right? They don't even sort of see the wider map. And I'm not judging that. That's just how people do it now. So how do we get information to people about the path network in those sort of circumstances and stuff? Is yeah.
Oh,
sorry.
There's more than two on it, so it's better
Yeah.
if Mike switches it off, actually, if that's okay.
Mike's isn't. It's only mine that's on.
Yeah, that's fine. Yours can stay
Yeah.
on, then if Mike's is off, right.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, on the Google Maps, because there is no definition of what the route is, and I have got a lovely wide open track that in front of my house, which is actually a footpath, and when you go about 250 yards along it, you come to a squeeze style. So I get horse riders and cyclists. Cyclists are all right because they can lift their bikes over, but you know that people are just using places perhaps inappropriately just because it's a line on Google Maps, and I think that is causing quite a few problems, certainly for landowners.
Nick.
Quick one. Thanks, Jack. Really interesting presentation. Extending Charlotte's point a little bit, I think, so from my clarity, is the research solely focused on footpaths and walking, or does the research include other user groups and footpath, other path types?
It's focused on public rights of way. So all of the analysis we've done is about public rights of way, everything up to byways open to all traffic. The Strava analysis is based on walking, running, and hiking. So yeah, but and just on the lost paths thing, our volunteers will go with what the best evidence says for whatever, because they're not focused on upgrading footpaths to right-of-ways particularly, or things like that, but if there's no access currently, and the best way to get access for it to be a right-of-way or a restricted byway, then they'll apply for that. And often with historical applications, that is the best way, because they leave a deeper imprint in the historical record, like an old lane or something like that, compared to a footpath.
Paul.
Are you working in conjunction with other access groups from other outdoor activities? I'm thinking particularly people like Cycling UK, who are also looking at this. It would seem crazy to duplicate effort where if you could add resource by teaming up. Is that something that's in the plan?
We work, I don't know exactly. I mean, I know that Cycling UK have done some analysis about the National Cycle Network, I think. Is that what you're thinking of? Or just generally in a more wider... Generally, So in a wider, we do work closely with Cycling UK, British Horse Society, Open Space Society, British Canoeing, and I suppose the level of those varies on the subject matter. So, for instance, I think with British Canoeing and Open Space Society, we do quite a lot on the political advocacy side of things. On Don't Lose Your Way, on our Lost Ways, we work really closely with the British Horse Society and with the Open Space Society. But we run training days together and stuff like that. So, I'm on the and we work with Cycling UK, with Sustrans. So we do want to work across the whole organisation, because investment in any part of the access network helps all users, really, I think. And that's how we need to work together on this. And our membership combined is more influential than our membership sort of separated. Or not just our membership, but our supporters and our influence.
Yeah. Ben, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, this might be a useful time just for me to throw my oar in as to the sort of stuff we've been doing, because on that specific point around what we're doing as access organisations, you're right, British Canoeing, OSS, BHS, BMC, and a whole load of others. We're just about to launch what's called Outdoors for All. So it's at the designers at the moment. So essentially, it's a manifesto piece. It's a set of asks setting out our vision for the outdoor recreation. So we've come together as a core collective, sort of those I've just named. And what we've done is we've expanded it out now to a whole load of others. We're expecting around 15-20 sign-ons to Outdoors for All. So it's a political influencing piece, and I'll make sure it's sent round as soon as we've got it. The whole point of Outdoors for All is we're not very good as a sector at communicating in a consistent way. You know, you want paths, I want water. You know, the horses, the cyclists, everybody wants slightly different versions of a very similar theme. So the whole point of Outdoors for All that we've just developed is to try and have a consistent response to these discussions around right to roam, and to find a consistent set of words that we can all use. I know the Ramblers are keen on an access to nature bill. You know, BMC might take a different view, but what we've done with Outdoors for All is to try and come up with an umbrella set of asks that will combine us all. So that's coming out really shortly. And like I say, it'll be across a number of different organisations. So that's quite cool. This is a really interesting moment. I mean, sorry, Jet, just to pick up on something else you said, I'd set the context a little bit. You talked about 15 minutes to nature, and you touched on that. I don't know how much people know about 15 minutes to nature, but it's the big DEFRA headline at the moment around there. What they're trying to do is create access within 15 minutes walk of home, and that's their big juicy policy, DEFRA's big juicy policy ambition, and that's what they've set their sights on now. I think I said at a previous meeting, their focus is on baseline data information gathering in this first year without actually implementing anything. You can imagine that because it's a general election next year. They're not going to make huge decisions. But there is, I've got a meeting tomorrow, there is some really interesting policy coming out around how they intend or potentially intend to implement that. Like I said, it won't happen within the next year, but there's already a lot of work happening within DEFRA around how they want to implement that 15 minutes to green and blue spaces. And so certainly from a wet perspective, it's quite interesting to see that. So that's interesting from a government point of view, but then just sort of broadening it out as well and not just tagging on, without waffling on too long, to this whole question of right to roam is a really interesting discussion at the moment. I know we've had Guy and Nick presented when we were in lockdown, and we've had lots of different perspectives. I think everybody's probably got a different view on whether right to roam is a good thing, bad thing, whether they like the term, whether they don't like the term. But I think it's the term we've got at the moment, and it's one that most people recognise. But there's some really interesting discussions, and we're working quite closely as a little collective to try and get down to the knotty issues, let's say, of what right to roam means to different people and how it would work in practice. I don't know how many of you saw or read The Guardian on Friday, and you probably saw that there was a big headline saying Labour have climbed down from bringing a new right to roam. They'd already committed to a new right to roam bill. Obviously, since the reshuffle and the shadow ministers moved over, there's a slightly different approach. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. What I would urge you to do, and I'll send it to Mike, if you haven't seen it already, there's a really interesting video on the Farmer's Guardian. I don't know how many of you have seen this on YouTube. So I imagine it's a farming newspaper. Are you going to come on to this? Or
No, but I think I know. Is it the one in the Peak? Is it
yeah,
in the Peak
it's in the
District?
Peak Park. Yeah, it's got Andrew Critchlow on, who most of you, I'm sure some of you will be familiar with. And it's 4 farmers. It's the shadow farming minister, and there's a host. It's a really, really, really good discussion, and it gets really into the weeds of the practicalities of what right to roam, that term, means to a farmer who moves his cows around the different fields and how it would work in practice. I think what's really interesting to come out of it, just to finish off, is the shadow farming minister said Labour will do something. We are going to do something in this space. Make no bones about it. We're gonna do something on access. That's what we stand for. What we're going to do. We want to work with people, work with farmers to design what that is, and the key word is responsible access. So I would urge you, it's an hour long, but you can skip through it if there's bits that you don't want to watch. But I would urge you, there's lots in the mix at the moment. Discussions about what right to roam means, the 15 minutes to nature, the Labour policy, obviously the right to roam campaign, all bubbling around at the moment. But I think what you'll see in the next sort of year to 18 months, depending on which way the political wind blows, is some movement in this space. And that's quite exciting. And this is fantastic to real evidence-based stuff is really going to drive that change.
I mean, I agree with all of that. I think just one last point on that, I suppose, from my point of view, is that what this research is trying to do, and maybe I'm repeating something I said earlier, it's trying to say, like, don't forget about the importance of linear access in these conversations, because I think that and how much that enables like more people to go walking, gives them the confidence to go walking and cycling and running and riding, so I think I think it is, it's hopefully well placed for those discussions, and I think it is an exciting time, whether from some people's perspective there's a sort of climb down from right to aim. I'm never quite sure the Labour Party were that committed in the first place, really, but whatever happens, I think it seems like we're coming towards a period of the next sort of big piece of access legislation. Countryside Rights of Way Act, I suppose the England Coast Path as well, and then going back further. It feels like it's the time for the next big one, and what that looks like. As you said, the Ramblers have got some ideas, others have got ideas. We're coming together on a lot of stuff, so it is an exciting time, I think.
Brilliant.
I've probably taken up too much of your time.
No, that's fantastic. Thank you very much. Oh yes, Mike says we can invite you to stay for lunch if you would like to.
Okay,
and you're
sure.
obviously very welcome
I'll
to stay for the rest of the meeting.
Continue discussion.
I'll be around for more discussion at lunchtime.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, one of the thoughts that I have is that whether it's Right to Roam, whether it's a new extended version of Crow, whatever it is, the role. So as a local access forum, we are set up under the Crow Act. So if we're looking at a change to Crow, an extension of Crow, anything, I think forums like, and even under Right to Roam, forums like this become more important because we start to ask, as you say, if we're going into a new era, we're asking new questions, deeper questions of a new set of people with a new set of audiences. And so actually all of the kind of role of groups like this becomes more important, I
agree.
think.
And like this is a little bit, sorry, one more thing,
No,
maybe slightly off message. No, I don't think it is off message, but I think personally that part of this, new access could give more power to organisations like this, because we see in some parts of the country, I think it's maybe different in national parks, but in some parts of the country, the LAF hasn't met for like 5 years, or there isn't a rights of way improvement plan. There hasn't been one for 10 years, or there is one, but nothing's ever, so I think there's, and I'm not sure what that looks like, so I'm not sort of saying the Ramblers are signing up, but you know what I mean? I think I think these are incredibly valuable forums and the knowledge here. So, how can that be given more teeth, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agree. Thank you. Thank you very much. So lots to think about, and I'm sure that's going to inform lots of our discussions afterwards, and we'll make sure that the slides and either copies of the reports or links to the reports go around after the meeting. So I guess to bring that down to a kind of very kind of practical and local level, Martin is going to, Martin, you can explain your role with the Ramblers, but Martin's going to talk a bit about the local sort of perspective as work that he does with the Ramblers and how that relates.
Right.
Go.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jack. Right. Some of you might recognise this. This is on Bonsall Ridge, looking towards Brightgate. A sort of wonderful sort of arc as a tunnel for the trees. This is me, Martin Bennett. I'm Group Footpath Secretary for Derbyshire Dales Ramblers. My role really just gives me, I've always got an excuse to get out on a wet Tuesday morning and go and see an obstruction or something to go out. And most of the time, I'll spend a lot of time walking on my own. Just to quote Charlotte, actually one of the things I like, Charlotte, is I like a feeling of being abandoned in the middle of nowhere and just wandering around the path network. So that's me. First steps, we start off with children, and I've got a grandchild taking his first steps. Inspiration, John Constable with his paintings probably made us look for the first time without people in it and look at the landscapes. And of course Wordsworth as well, poetry gets us going. This is a wander above a sea of fog, although I wonder it ought to be above a sea of rain with the amount of we've had. The network of paths, I mean, I just think in England, Wales, I think it's a unique national asset. It's hard to think of anywhere else in the world that we have anything quite like we've got. The fact that we can walk across the country as a right-of-way all the time. Perhaps the cycling network in the Netherlands is akin to that. And that does have all its network numbered. Again, that's one of Charlotte's points. But really, I think it's a national treasure. I just think it's so wonderful to walk on our right-of-way network. And that's 225,000 kilometres of right-of-way we've got. The other thing to sell, as I'm sort of selling Britain here, is our Ordnance Survey maps, which I think are second to none. So they're the things which support the right-of-way network, and then in themselves are a work of art. Benefits we know about the physical health. Almost every week there's an article coming out saying what we should do. As I'm driving today, they were saying that Michael Mosley, Radio 4, this morning was just one thing. Going for a walk in the rain can boost your mood. Who knew? It just, everyone gets out and walk. So what do? Footpath Secretary. There's 1,700 kilometres of rights of way in Derbyshire Dales. Largely I'm looking at footpath issues, so it's signage, surfaces, structures, and obstructions when they come up. Most obstructions are not that bad, but if they do, then I report them to rights of way. I'm going to talk about the definitive map and orders. Planning applications is a part of my role. I probably do probably about 120 planning applications. I'm a statutory consultee, so I get consulted on those. Most responses are no objection, and I just add a caveat saying as long as the rights of way is open, it's accessible, and to make sure that safety of walkers is taken into account, and PROW must be consulted on any changes. I have to say the rights of way, that the planning, if the rights of way were shown on the plans, that would make my job a lot clearer. I do find it quite difficult to look at the layers to work exactly out where they go. Occasionally I make a site visit. Most of it, that is a paper organisation. So most are fairly straightforward. I get statutory, any orders which come through, so if it's creation orders, diversions, extinguishments, I get these come through, plus also consultations. How much you can see this. This is a very straightforward one. If you see the dark line is the present path, and then the dotted one is the proposed one. And it's such a minor difference, but the main problem is it was going through that house garden and was actually obstructed, so people were already using the path down the side. And this is the equivalent on the OS map. So that was a pretty straightforward a consultation. And again, I just send in a response with some comments. Whilst I'm out, if I'm going for a drive, I'm worried about some of my carbon footprint. So normally if I go and see it, that didn't take me very long. So I usually go for a walk afterwards. And this was a walk when I went over the district boundary to Amber Valley. And when I was out walking, I came across a couple of issues. We started with bridleways. You see this bridleway here, which is truncated. So I went to have a walk along there, and it's just a field. Probably it was an occupation road. But again, looking at this one down here, again, truncated, it stops, but actually there is a track and you can walk along it. So when I got back on the definitive map, you can change the layers and you can bring up the historic Ordnance Survey maps. Whilst I was looking as well, if you see in blue here, these are footpaths, 3 footpaths, which are no longer in use. So you wonder what's happened to those, why did we lose them? So again, there's research for that, and we've got a couple of coordinators now for Don't Lose Your Way, which I'll pass those on to. I talked about the 1,700 kilometres of rights of way network. I am helped with that. We've got 110 parishes, some with great names like Marston Montgomery and Somerset Herbert. It took me a while to get my head around all of those. But I'm helped by 41 parish path wardens, and between us we cover 73 of the 110 parishes. And the parishes range from 91 rights of way, which is Matlock, to just one footpath. And the one footpath, if anyone recognises that, there's some St Mary's Bower, and it's Chatsworth, and Chatsworth has just got one path. And I'm the parish path warden for that one. It doesn't take me very long. I go once a year, and it's always okay. You'll know it well. And what I ask the parish path wardens is to walk the paths at least once a year. I give them some guidelines with a bit more information for this, and the things we're looking for is signposting, waymarking, bridges, stiles, gates, any obstructions, ploughing and cropping, and surface condition. And say they I send some guidance out for that. Usually I try and meet them when they first start, and we go for a joint walk. I send them a set of maps and various things just to help them along. I talk about the detail, so I ask them to talk about the parish, the right-of-way status and the right-of-way number. So I send them maps out for that, but they've also got the definitive map to have a look at. And when they're talking about things like location, I usually ask them to say, with myself as well, to give at least 2 pieces of location, and possibly 3, just because if in the end it ends up a bit like Chinese whispers going to rights of way. So if it's the path number, but is it the eastern end of the footpath, or if it is up a road, so just to help rights of way find out. And likewise with the detail, again, 2 or 3 bits of detail, not just a broken stile or a step, but is it the second step? So really just to help the report go down the line. Photographs, absolutely invaluable, again, for that. And this is just an example of just recording. I sort of send them an Excel spreadsheet, very simple, just to fill in, or they can use a Word document. Really what I want is I just want a summary of if they do 25 paths in Bakewell or whatever it is, so then they can just summarise to me what they've done. This on here, I just sort of stuck this at the bottom. This is a waymarker from North Yorkshire. I was up there a couple of weeks ago. Waymarkers, I think, are really, really useful. There's a discussion in rights of way as to whether how many you should have and how useful they are. What I think about is really good for theirs is they've got public footpath, which states that the status on it. It's got the yellow background, but it's also got the website with the reporting bit. And I think that's really useful because lots of people say, I think Jack mentioned about sort of rights of way. People just do not know their rights. So I'd like to see that sort of set as a national standard. A couple of issues. This was from one of our path wardens, named this branch the Sword of Damocles, which we eventually got moved. The path went right underneath it. This is the footbridge. If you can look on here, it's losing its footings due to poaching from livestock. So that is going to disappear at some point. You can also see the barbed wire down here. I was talking about someone just before this. Barbed wire. My experience of going in France, Germany and the Netherlands is I do not see anywhere near the amount of barbed wire. I feel that in Britain it's quite unique, and I don't wonder why it is. I mean, it is necessary for livestock, but it just seems to be somewhat gratuitous, and I think it will be an interesting discussion as to why. I've talked about the definitive map. This is the key thing which correlates with the Ordnance Survey map. An issue here, this is in Wirksworth. They put a road through here in the 1930s. The definitive map, you can see now, goes across mid-air, and it comes out onto here. The actual path comes down here. The problem with this bit here is the wall is damaged, it's falling down. Because it's not on a definitive map, because it's not an adopted highway or the list of streets, nobody's got responsibility. Right of way don't want to go and do anything about it. That's a fairly minor one until it becomes a major one. You'll also notice as well that this path here, footpath 86, goes through 2 buildings, and that is, again, that's obstructed at the moment. We're fortunate in Wordsworth is that there's lots of alternatives, but that's still the case. I've also, just on say here, taken a snapshot. This bit here is the Puzzle Gardens, where you can just go in and out and walk all around. The lines in pink are the adopted highways, so they're actually covered on the local authority. And again, they all are walked. We'll talk about parts where not walked, but this is pretty much pretty walked. The other thing just to note as well is that the red dot, Derbyshire County Council have been doing a fantastic programme of putting signposts up, really putting loads of money in, and they show signposts to go on as red dots to be contracted on. A couple of other issues. Back to a style here. I've just reported this one. It's reasonably okay, but if you look here, these 2 strands of rolled wire, which is good, but they are very high, far too high. So I was just looking at the British Standard regulations. So I've asked for at least the top strand to be removed. On here, the exemplary bit is here is the barbed wire ending at this point. And again, British Standards guidance is you should have 1 metre either side. When you're next out walking, see how many styles where the barbed wire is not wrapped around the post and you've ripped jackets and things. This one came up in the minutes. This is part of our Safer Roads Fund, which Jill Millwood has put in, £2.2 million pound project to improve the safety on the roads. The footpath comes from here and then it crosses the road up that place there. If you look on here, you can see the bend going round. Fine coming from this way. Imagine if you're stood there. It's completely blind. You have to walk out into the road by about 1.5 metres before you see if there's a car coming. It's 50 mile an hour, most people doing 60. So it's a thing. I've had a further thought as to whether actually the only solution is to get a footbridge going over, because although I think the proposal is to put some footage along there, but I still think it's going to be a problem. So I think it's probably one of the most lethal footpaths I've seen.
Some very big lorries on that road as well.
Sorry?
Some very big lorries on that road.
Absolutely, yeah. It's and it's dark and it's shaded. Rights of Way network. I say it's absolutely fantastic. I think there are some issues with it. We need to link up. Every time I look at an OS map, if I see a blank grid square with no rights of way, I'm wondering why. Because surely we moved up to 100 years ago. The only way we got around for most people was by foot. So why are there rights of way in that? The other problem I think we've got is what I call dead-end footpaths. And this is from Elliston, which you drive over in Staffordshire, going up to Mayfield. The circles in red are footpaths or bridleways which just end at the road. And if you know the road, there is almost no footway at all. Again, speed limit is 50 or 60. So to venture onto those as a pedestrian or a walker would be absolutely lethal. So it's really, how do we do joining up? One of the big hopes with the Michael Gove's the Environmental Land Management Scheme, I thought perhaps we could start to put in links down the side of the road, particularly with pasture. Is that so much of a loss for nature? But unfortunately, it seems to be watered down, so we're still stuck with this. We've actually got one bridleway. The idea of taking a horse on that B road, I think would be a challenge. And I think even for cyclists as well. So we could have a look. This photograph here is just off the it's Harbour Rocks, High Peak Trail. You'll know the car park to there. Here's the access to it. Again, just looking here, why can't we have a route inside the field going to the car park, a few hundred metres, just for safety? So that's really, I think, so when we're looking at access, what things we should be, these are, again, part of discussion things we should be doing. Right, and that is the end. And this last photograph is when we one of the things about the role, one of the things I really appreciate is the is being on the LAF and having site visits. And this is going up to Edale. We went to go and look at some the path surface for the Bridleway. We had a highways engineer who's talking about sort of drainage and things. And then again with the other officers around here, it is just it's so valuable for me to go and have a look, and helps my role. So that was a quick rattle through.
That's fantastic, Martin. Thank you very much. Has anybody got any questions or comments for Martin on what he's been saying? Paul? Can you put in?
On.
Thank you.
Yeah. Great presentation. With your army of parish volunteers and eyes and ears on the place, how do people in the general public contact those parish volunteers, and is that their role? So, I don't know, I'm walking somewhere and I find somebody who's made a huge barbed wire stile. How can I contact my local parish rep and say, this is here, can you feed it into the system?
What I'd say, Paul, is contact me. Go through me. So we've got on our group website, Ramblers website, there's all my contact details, and largely, I say come through me. The parish path wardens, I mean, they might have their own contacts with the parish councils and things, but largely they come through me. So any issues to do. I mean, I'd say either just you could either report it direct to Rights of Way, report it to me, or preferably do both on that. And then when it comes to me, then I will then pass it on to the parish path warden.
When you say Rights of Way, you mean Derbyshire County Council?
Derbyshire County Council, yeah. I mean, one thing I should mention about just reporting, lots of positives about PROW and Derbyshire County Council with the signposts that are going in. One of the bugbears really of my role is the reporting format for the definitive map. I made a report and I counted the number of steps, and it's actually 20 steps from the time you log on. You go to the definitive map to check the number, you then go to this menu, it then asks you, do you want to continue? Well, of course I want to continue. I mean, why wouldn't be here? I mean, it just goes on of all these menus, and you go backwards. It is so clunky. If you've used Fix My Street, it is such a quick reporting network. You go on, it uses the OS, you put your tag on it and you log it in. It's got location, details, and goes through. It takes probably, I don't know, 6 at a time. Rutland County Council, they use Fix My Street with a hybrid. I have to say, so much of my time, just reporting issues just takes so long. If you've not had a go, just have a go. And it's not Rights of Ways issue, it's more of a Derbyshire County Council corporate IT thing. That's the problem with lies it. It is very clunky. It takes long. And I think a lot of people, just the general public, will just lose the will to live as to report it as it goes through. So that would be my one thing in terms of improvement.
You ever tried Staffordshire's?
I have tried Staffordshire, yes, that's also... the local authorities, all of them, I was using Nottingham the other day. They really... Say, Fix My Street is such a simple one to do. And the other things also is, again, one of the things I have to copy the text I've put in, because Derbyshire County Council don't forward you, they just send you a reference number. So I'm looking at this reference number thinking, what is it? The Peak Planning, they do send a copy of your response. Nottinghamshire send you a copy of a Rights of Way response. So surely with the IT, it's not difficult to do that. And so what I do is I've now, in the last year, I've been, every report I put in, either from myself or the parish path wardens, I've now put into an Excel spreadsheet, and I'm now keeping a log, so I can now go back and trace where it is. So if it's, if it's half frog at 7:15 or whatever, what's happened to it, I can find it. So again, it should be so much easier. I mean, in fact, why not have a live system? Fix My Street again is live. You go on it, and it's there to see. So I think there's something we could improve, and whether we could go for a national system would be even better. One for Jack, perhaps, like follow with the Ramblers.
Yeah. Thanks, Martin. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? I think maybe your point about possible improvements to that reporting process we could maybe raise with Rob the next time we have a meeting with him, because there might be simple things. Going as far as fix my street might be too much, but maybe just getting a copy of your report might be something that could make happen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
The next item, is everyone doing okay, by the way? The next item on the agenda is Andy Farmer, I think it's sort of following the change to the way the LAF has been kind of structured, and also changes to the access and rights of way team, and changes to the way the authority itself is structured and the way things are funded. Andy wanted to come in and talk to us about that process, where we are, and also thinking about, I guess, some of the prioritisation and way forward and the role of the LAF. Is that?
Well, the work of the team, the work of the team, I guess, really.
Yeah, fantastic.
In terms of, so this should change your okayness. So, so sorry about that. So, sorry, where's the clicker, Mike? Sorry. Oh, brilliant. Thank you very much. Just make sure. So, so what I'm trying to outline, I suppose, is the new function of the team in terms of what we're doing as a team, because I think that makes the context of which we're working for you, really. And then the priorities of our work, and then some priorities within that. So that's kind of where I'll take us to. And I'm happy to answer questions afterwards. So, so that's a bit of a busy slide, sorry, but it kind of tells you where we are in the new structure. So we now sit in landscape and engagement team structure. So Sue might be here in a little bit. So Sue Fletcher's the head of service for that. So there's now chief executive and 4 heads of service essentially, and Sue is the head of service for this section. So as you can see, we kind of sit within the obviously the ranger team are in there, access and ranger team, and I'll talk about that shortly. Obviously fit with the farming and protected landscapes, the land and nature manager, and the engagement team manager. So that's kind of what the structure looks like. So I sit there. Now there are 4 or 3 posts sitting below me in terms of team leaders. And everybody's here today and they're going to introduce themselves. You'll know them anyway. But they'll quickly say what their work is, really. So Mike, do you want to kind of just start? Because it's a bit of change for you.
I wasn't expecting that, Andrew. Okay, so I am... am I on?
Use that one.
Sorry, so, since the restructure, where previously, of course, I was the Access and Rights of Way manager, alongside Andy, the restructure, I've gone down part-time and gone down a grade voluntarily, and I now job share with Rich the same job, which is Ranger Service Team Leader. So there's 2 posts Ranger Service Team Leader, so me and Rich job share the management of half of the Rangers, and Jess, who's at the back, manages the other half of the Rangers. Our role, therefore, is principally to line manage those Rangers and ensure that we make sure they have clear priorities and know what is expected of them. And we steer them through that. Rich and I retain within our job description an emphasis on access and rights of way. So the Rangers that we manage directly, although effectively work on behalf of the whole Ranger Service, prioritise the work on access and rights of way. Jess's team, I presume Jess is going to talk a little bit, she has slightly different priorities and she can talk about those. So my job really has changed with regards, I'm no longer team leader, Andy's my line manager. We still have access and rights of way as part of our remit, but more directly control over, control isn't really the right word. We line manage the Rangers, so we're able to have a direct input in terms of the delivery of the work that we are aspiring towards. whereas previously, of course, Rich, Sue and I, who were the Access and Rights Away team, worked alongside the rangers and didn't have direct line management control. So that's how we see an improvement in this new structure, is the fact that we can see it from sort of all the way down to the actual banging in the nail, as it were. Okay.
Rich, do you want to add anything?
Just that we obviously regularly liaise, particularly with Rob Gretrix at Derbyshire and with Paul at Staffordshire on a day-to-day basis with just the management of the rights of way, so they can, in effect, we're sort of, I suppose it'd be fair to say, subcontracting on some of the network, that they will guide us as to what their priorities are based on what some of our priorities are. Fair enough.
I'll talk about that in a minute, because we've got a slide around that. So Jess, do you want to say something from a kind of the operations kind of side of it?
Can you come to a microphone, because then the people watching online can hear you. Perfect.
Oh dear. Hello, Sue. I was just about to introduce myself, but I mean, I feel like I could introduce you instead, so you just walked through the door. I'm Jess Coatsworth. Some of you might have met me before in maybe a different role. I've sat in on a laugh probably once, so don't be offended if you don't know who I am. So I'm the other half of that Ranger team leader kind of duo. My role is Ranger team leader, operations and partnerships, which kind of does what it says on the tin. I manage the rangers that work in those water company partnerships, and then I also have a kind of operational overview, if you like, of the north of the park, where we no longer have a ranger on the ground. So I very much work and pick up a lot of those partnerships that we have with the National Trust, RSPB, the water companies, as well as looking at new partnerships like Sheffield and Rotherham Wildlife Trust and some of those other people we work with up there. So a slightly different slant from Mike and Rich. I don't have that same kind of rights of way emphasis, obviously, but we're all picking up on the same kind of priorities work, which Andy will mention shortly.
Yeah, will do. And Sue?
Hi, you know me well. Although my role has changed slightly. My job title is Access and Rights Away Officer. I think the best way to describe it is that I work through the authority's statutory responsibilities. So that's in relation to access land, that's in relation to the making of orders. Those two support the planning function, the public path orders, and as well with access land, we have the directions, but also it's the role of the access authority, enabling access to access land, and I'll give you an update on that later. The other role that I have is in relation to accessibility, so it's access and accessibility, and miles without stiles, so particularly focusing on the infrastructure side of things, although recently with the DEFRA Access for All funding, it's been drawing together accessibility in all its different forms. And the financing of that through the authority's Access Fund. And again, I'll give an update on that later. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. And I think it's fair to say that hopefully we try to work together as much as possible in terms of, because we've got a lot of different expertise and sharing of information. As Sue's just come in, Sue, do you want to just say hello?
One or two of you, but not actually that many of you. I'm Sue Fletcher, and through the recent organisational change process that Andrew's been talking about, I've now become the Head of Landscape and Engagement. So I know that Andy's been taking you through that. Might be useful for you to know just a little bit about me. So I'm quite a long stayer with the National Park Authority, looking at Charlotte, in various different guises. I started off in property management with the authority, and then branched out more into a wider environmental and economy with the local community, particularly the farming and land management community. And then more latterly, I've been doing national work on behalf of all the English National Park authorities, and an example of that is the creation of the Farming and Protected Landscapes programme, which I know that you've had one of the updates from Sue, that Sue's provided. So I was part of a very small 4 protected landscape reps and a small group with DEFRA who basically created that programme. So I think now in terms of these two services being brought together, landscape and engagement, it's my role to look at how we go forward strategically in these challenging financial times, should we say, and to look for those synergies in terms of that closer working. But right now, I'm really in a listening and learning in terms of the new areas of work that I'm now responsible for. And I have to say, I'm just really very blessed to have some great team managers and great officers across both these new teams. So that's a quick intro from me. Thanks, Andy.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so thanks very much for that. So that's the kind of structure. And then just to follow from that, that's the ranger team that are kind of out in the field. So we're effectively down to 10 rangers now across the national park. And as you can see, they're quite large areas that they have to look after. As Jess says, we haven't got a ranger in the top, but Jess has an overview with the partnerships up there around Yorkshire Water, National Trust Marsden, UU at RSPB, the RSPB at Duffstones. I suppose the important thing to kind of say is that post there, and that post there are joint partnerships with United Utilities, and there's 2 posts. Oh, I've got my geography wrong. There's 2 posts. Well, that's bad, isn't it? Don't even know what I'm looking at. And there's 2 posts there which are in partnership with Severn Trent Water. So this is the Upper Derwent essentially that you can see there. So that's the kind of setup, and that's where the rangers are across the field. So I suppose, to kind of give you an idea of what the team now does, because it's a wider aspect. I'm not going to read those out per se, but hopefully you can see that. But it's a much wider remit. Obviously, Sue's kind of highlighted the statutory roles that we have to do, and that's kind of caught up in some of that work. Obviously, the Local Access Forum, the Green Lane Strategy, which I'll come back to a little bit later. There's stuff around the Fires Operation Group, which is an essential part of the work that we do in the National Park, because we unfortunately have an awful lot of fires in this National Park. And I'm the chair of that group. It's a very successful group across the whole of the, in terms of recognition across the whole of the country. Obviously, the standard visitor management, and then our work around delivering the diverse audience plan, whether it's health walks and so on. And obviously, the really essential part that we really can't get on with, John will know as well, is the role of volunteers in that. So those rangers that you see directly man language volunteers, and we can hardly do any of that work as well, apart from the statutory stuff, obviously, which we have to do, without the help of volunteers. So it's quite a wide remit of the team. And again, we all shared slightly different expertise in that, but that's what we're delivering across the whole piece, if that kind of makes sense. But within that, we have priorities, because we have to prioritise everything because the resources are fairly, are reduced. Within that, we've got priorities within our access and rights of way work. So again, kind of alluded the stuff that Sue's alluded to. There's the statutory stuff around orders linked to the planning developments, which again we have to do. There's Sue's mention of a smooch amend the access wall, and that's going to kick into gear again next year in terms of that, and Sue probably gives us a bit more on that. The review of open access directions, which I know come to this board. What we've also done around access is developed an access app, which rangers can use on the phone. We're going to demonstrate that at lunchtime. Jess is going to show us that. We've got on an iPad. It's a really effective way of us organising work. What that means is that every access point that we have in the National Park, we've now got on an app, and we can monitor those on a real-time basis, basically, complete with photographs, etc. So we've got a really good database building up of our access points, and we'll demonstrate that. We're developing work around recreation hubs, which is within the National Park Management Plan, and we're still kind of fixing our envelope of that, and I think we've got a wider management team discussion on that next next week. But it will incorporate aspects of all of our work, basically. So that kind of recreation approach, that area management approach to locations will incorporate any of that. And that's something that's in development, but is within the National Park Management Plan. I've also got the ease of use survey and so on and so forth. But I suppose the important thing is that we no longer take inquiries for rights of way. Anything that comes in has to go to the Highway Authority. They are the responsible body, and we refer everybody to them in the first place. And as Richard said, because we work particularly with Derbyshire and Staffordshire, if they want us to do something, then we'll do that. But it really needs to go to that authority first, because they're responsible for doing that. So that's the approach that we're taking. So that's the overall kind of approach, but even that we've prioritised, because we just need to do that in terms of our work. So we've prioritised the work that we think we're able to do within the team, I suppose, on the ground. So that's the interpretation of what we're doing on the ground. So our focus for rights of way concession routes are the walks around booklets that we actually publish. You know, if we're publishing something, that needs to be pretty spot on. So we're doing that. Rights of way and concession routes on water company land. And I've got a map afterwards that kind of shows you what this looks like on the ground. Obviously the National Trail, so we have Martin, who's our Pennine Way Ranger, and he's working on that. We're working on other promoted routes. Obviously Limestone Way is a good example there. Routes that are identified as significantly enhancing new visitors' access from hubs. And that's the kind of, that stuff around confidence, information, and how you get people who may not be confident or not used to using routes, how you do that. And again, how you make those attractive so that people can actually access them. So we're trying to do some work around that. Obviously, rights of work that facilitate access to Crowland. FIPL work, so anything that we connect with farming and protected landscapes. And then obviously, as I already mentioned, access points and concession routes that we've put in, because we are responsible for them, hence the HAP, that's with a H. It's a whole new word. And obviously the monitoring of wider access points. That in itself is quite a challenge on an area basis, because each area is different. And by no means is each area going to do all of that. But it's a guide for the rangers in which we can try to prioritise our work, basically. And that's how we're trying to organise. And kind of how that looks like on a map. So this is some work that Jess has done with the rangers up at the Upper Derwent. And the red, I think, is the walks around booklets, isn't it? I think, off the top of my head. You think so the red are the walks around booklets that we publish, so we have to make sure those are there. And then these purple ones are other priority routes within that that we need to make sure are up to standard. So that in itself, that challenge, when we only get 20,000, well, we gratefully get £20,000 from Derbyshire County Council, and anything that Sue can do in terms of funding around access. So it's a real challenge in itself for us to do some of this work. And that's how we're trying to prioritise our work on an area basis. And that's kind of what we're doing. And that says it gives a bit more focus and ability to understand what we can do and what we can't do. And I suppose the stuff that's kind of sitting around that is the ongoing Green Lane strategy, which we've talked about. And I suppose the important part is that the PPM, the National Park, will continue to respond to issues arising on priority routes, of which green lanes form a part. They form part of the whole picture. And we will incorporate that within the Recreation Hub as we go forward. But the important part to remember, and I think Moscow Lane and Lyme and Swan Rake are good examples of that, is that it's a partnership. It has to be a partnership because we can't do it. We haven't got resources. So, you know, that partnership approach to green lane strategies and how those highways authorities work on that is an essential part of the whole strategy, basically, and that's really important. And as I say, we'll continue to work with all of those stakeholders in terms of delivering what we've delivered. And obviously what the work may entail is that stuff at the bottom in terms of signage and resurfacing. But, you know, the important part of that is it's proportionate to the approach, and it's by the appropriate bodies subject to resources available, because that's the reality of where we are, basically. So, so that's a really quick, snappy, I told you it wouldn't feel better, overview of the work of the team. And I'm happy to take, I'm sure, the team, any questions?
Yeah, we'll start with any sort of questions or clarifications for Andy on what he said, and then maybe I think, or as well, a broader discussion as well about the work of the authority and where we think the priorities might be for the team, if we have different thoughts and ideas about where that should be. So Charlotte, and then Nick, and then Claire. I think
Thanks ever so much for that, Andy. That has really helped to clarify what the new structure is and how it will work. And I hope that you can see that there is a role for the LAF within that as a group of all the major user groups within the national park, and that we really look forward to working with you on moving in any way that we can help move this forward. I think it's very good that you have put the emphasis back to the people that have the responsibility for it. So enforcement is the police, rights of way repairs are the highway authorities, because I think a lot was shouldered by the national park, which maybe expectations were higher than you could deliver. And I think the clarity that you put in your presentation as to where the National Park Authority sees those responsibilities lying is very helpful for things moving forward. And I do hope that the LAF will be part of this new structure, and that you will value the sound counselling that has been given to the Park Authority in the past, and that we hope will continue in the future. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, thanks very much, Charlotte. And I appreciate that. And you're right, it's the reality of where we are. So when we got together, you know, we had to function on what we think we could do. And I think a lot of what we do is value added. You know, that's a lot of what we do. But in terms of the LAF, and you know, we've had those discussions when we've sat around thinking about agendas. I really welcome and would embrace, in fact, the advice, the words, both to us and to the authority, because that's what you're there for as well. You know, and I think that's a really important role, to make sure that your voices, the collective voices, are heard in the authority. Because when choices are hard, people make hard choices. And people need to hear those voices, I think, in terms of what we're trying to deliver as a whole, and the stuff that Ben's been talking about as we look forward about what access might look like, depending on where we end up in future years, and how this bigger discussion is going to take part. Because, you know, we have been on a trajectory of reduced resources for quite a while now. And so we do need to prioritise, but the role of the LAF is absolutely essential in that.
I think it was Nick next.
Thanks, Andy. A note of thanks, as well as a question, I think, is that note of thanks to conservation and ranger volunteers who, around the Peak Park, obviously have a massive impact on what you guys are doing, and especially the Longdendale Valley over the last, so I think United Utilities has been a bit absent around there for a number of years. The last 18, well, they've done a bit of work recently on drainage and grading one of the paths, but the last 12 to 18 months, I think ranger volunteers have made a massive improvement to the equestrian side of that path, all the way from, more or less, from Hadfield all the way to the tunnel. How are maintenance works organised and planned within the National Park Authority? And is it, how can we as a group or individuals influence that? So I read, there's a massive amount of trees have been pulled out of there. Well, not trees, small bushes that are really a problem for equestrians in that area, and there's drainage issues around that path, that section of TPT. How do we know that it's going to come back around and keep being maintained?
No, that's fine. I mean, Jess might want to say a little bit more, but first it's fair to say that United Utilities, I think, are conscious of perhaps a slight neglect on the Transpennine Trail and that London Rail Trail. And I know Jess, and we've just changed ranger up there actually, so there'll be a change there. I know Jess met with UU, with the ranger, to decide, to overlook that trail, to see what can be done in terms of priorities and what we can contribute to it. Now, obviously, you know, as you've alluded to, we have got a range of volunteers, and volunteers love doing some of that stuff, and we have done some of that, but some of it is a bit higher and bigger than us. I suppose, you know, it's like all these things, it's making sure that voices, whether it be the LAF or yourself or horse riders, are heard within those organisations, and that we are hearing that and feeding that back to that organisation as well. So the area ranger who's up there now, Paul, you know, will hopefully be dynamic, and it's a two-way process by which we talk to UU and they talk back to us, and we've got another meeting with United Utilities in a couple of weeks' time at a relatively high level around those priorities. The partnerships with other water companies are really great for us in terms of delivering that work and adding money that we can't normally get to. So that's great. In terms of how we organise outside of that, you know, we organise because resources are limited, we organise ourselves around those priorities. And unfortunately, because it's really hard to, you know, that's an overall guide. On a day-to-day basis, I suppose Sue and the team leaders have to leave that to the rangers on the ground about how that's prioritised, because they know better than we do about what the important things are happening in that area, and how, you know, to go back to how audiences and visitors and people are using those routes. That was also a bit rambly, sorry.
No, thank you. Jess, do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, so with regards specifically to the TPT, Nick, we met earlier in the year with UU. They've had a bit of a shake-up within their team, so they've got a new catchment, not a new catchment manager, the person who manages all the catchment managers. He's very keen to be very proactive about the TPT. It's a source of a lot of complaints for UU, for obvious reasons. So we met on site with a local woman who has been in touch about the horse riding side of the trail, the equestrian side of the trail, and we're looking at what improvements we could do there. You know, which bits UU are going to take on, which bits we can help with. And Paul, since moving to Longdale, kind of part-time from September, but he's there fully now, has been very proactive about trying to actually get them, you know, gearing UU towards, you know, directing them towards some FIPL funding. You know, there's FIPL funding to be spent still. Is there other things that other funding we can tap into? And he's keen to get UU to actually commit some money to it. So he's been very proactive. So hopefully that'll go forward. I mean, I think one of the things that we're keen to do across the park, and I know we've done it elsewhere, is get some of the user groups more directly involved as well. You know, if we can get perhaps some of the horse riders and the users of that side involved in what we want that trail to be, I think that's an ambition for somewhere like the TPT. So I'm hoping Paul will take that forward, but also, you know, if yourselves have got good contacts to continue to work on things like that, then let's do it.
Thank you, Jess. I'm going to go to Claire, and then Martin, and then John, if that's okay.
Thanks, Andy. Just a couple, really. You've described some pretty invidious choices that you've had to make there, and sort of in NHS terms, you're kind of triaging, you know, everything's important, and you've had to pick the most important of all those important things. And for what it's worth, I think you've made the right choices, actually. So I guess my questions are, you know, you're there's not much slack left, really, is there? And so what happens if, just if somebody's off sick out of that team of 10, is it? What happens if someone's off sick for more than a couple of weeks? And I guess my other question is, you showed us that structure. Is that structure now kind of guaranteed for a year or two, or is it potentially subject to further cuts down the line?
Well, I'll answer that a bit first. The chief executive, when he outlined the new structure, said it was for 5 years, didn't he, at least? So the funding that we've organised around that is for 5 years. We have some challenges because we want to do something about pay review, etc. But so the outline of the structure is for 5 years. Now, obviously, what happens in that period of time, one doesn't know. But that's what the structure has been outlined for. Yeah, it is. When I started back in 1643, there are a lot more rangers than there are now, and but I think, I suppose, that the way we've organised self with the resources that we've got, with what we're trying to deal with, that's the best we can do, I guess. And if somebody goes sick, well, we'll pull in. So Jess, for example, has been, we've had a vacancy because Paul swapped from Yubadoon to Longdale. We've had a vacancy up there, so Jess has gone and worked up there for a couple of days. We've got an office there, so you can do that. So we'll just pull together and try to help each other. It's never going to be perfect, but it is what it is. Same as you do in the NHS, I guess.
Can I just comment on that?
Yeah.
I think one of the points I've made through this restructuring process is that it actually creates a stronger team, and that does provide for people to be able to backfill in situations that you've described. Whereas before we were much more discreet in our roles. Andy and I were very sort of separate. In fact, at one time we were even in separate teams completely. Whereas now we have a bigger team, and we all have a role within that bigger team, but we're all able to work together. So I think actually the new structure is an improvement in that context.
Thank you. Martin.
Thanks, Andy, for that overview. I mean, part information, part just a query. As well as footpath secretary, we have an area footpath committee which covers the 6 districts for Derbyshire. I've just become area secretary for that. Rob Greatorex often comes along, so we've got really appreciative for that. At the moment, there's for High Peak, there is no footpath secretary, my role. So if you know of anybody who wants to do a thing, please get in touch, and I'll be happy to shadow them and bring them in. So that's sort of a bit of an overview, and one of the things I'm hoping to do is to liaise with my Rambler colleagues in the other adjacent local authorities. You mentioned about sort of rights of way deal with footpath issues, but within the park straddles, I think, is it 6, 7 local authorities? Yeah. How do you ensure that the rights of way network is up to the high standard across all of those local authorities?
Very, very good question. The honest truth is we don't. I mean, we have a strong relationship with Derbyshire. We have a strong relationship with Staffordshire. We have relatively strong relationships with the other authorities who have also been cut tremendously. Those rights of way authorities throughout the park have also suffered big cuts. I think the point is we will add value. We will try to add value to some of the things that they do. But essentially we don't do any work in some of those other locations unless the water companies are funding it, for example, and it's on their land. Now we do have an overview because we do the 5% ease of use survey of what the rights of way are like in the national park. But in terms of influencing, I suppose the best hope for that is what our recreation hubs will look like going forward, about how that will bring together all those partners that are trying to deliver improvements in that area. Now, that recreation hubs, as I say, we're going to talk about it a bit more widely as a wider management team next week. Not for 1 minute can the National Park lead all of those recreation hubs. It can't. So there's going to need to be other partners are going to need to step into that breach. But in principle, I suppose, all of our stakeholders have signed up to the National Park Management Plan. In principle. So, in principle, they would have signed up to those actions. So, you know, that's something we'll look forward. So I suppose we do talk with the other highways authorities all the time in terms of our direct action on it. It's pretty limited unless it's within our stuff around access and so on and so forth. Do anybody else, Richard or Mike or Sue, do you want to add anything to that?
Can you come to the microphone?
Yes, thank you. I think some rights of way seem to have a different approach. For example, Barnsley is much more happy at doing their own thing and getting on with it. East Cheshire is similar, whereas a place like Staffordshire hasn't quite got as much funding, welcomes any help they can get, I think. So it depends on the individual authorities as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, thanks, Rich. Yeah. Sue?
It's just in relation to accessible routes, the Miles Without Styles. We have a geographical spread across the whole of the national park. So we work with all the partners, the landowners, the highway authorities, but they are routes that sometimes the National Park funds, and that's why we have the Access Fund and Foundation and others to help us with that. Thank you.
Sue, is Miles Without Styles only coordinated by the National Park Authority, or does Derbyshire, Staffordshire have their own Miles Without Styles programme as well?
It's a National Park brand. So National Parks initiative across the whole of the UK, but we're developing specifications and rolling out to different areas, and many other locations are developing accessible routes. And I gave so when we first launched Miles Without Styles, I gave a presentation to the DADLAF about the Miles Without Styles routes.
John?
Yes, can I just put in the perspective from the volunteers? I've been volunteering with the National Park for the last 20 years, or will be next May, I think it'll be 20 years. And I've seen a tremendous change over the years that I've been doing it. You've got quite a big pool of volunteers. That pool, I think, is bigger than when I first started volunteering, because they've changed the structure of how you now train volunteers and use volunteers. One time we had a very sort of like involved program of training and took a lot of time and a lot of effort. Now subsequently people have said, well, why do they need all those skills? Why don't we just train individuals in particular skills that we're going to use them for? Which is what the policy tends to be now. So you've got a lot broader volunteer base. I could be out every day if I wanted, volunteering. There is that much work available. We have Better Impact that lists all the jobs. I can go in that any time of the day or night and volunteer for a particular job. The thing, when I started, we tended just to work Saturdays and Sundays. And that was when you saw the volunteers. Full-timers work during the week, covered us at the weekend. We'd have odd rangers in at weekend looking after the volunteers. The situation now is we are available to volunteer 7 days a week. So I can be out on a Monday volunteering, doing training on navigation. I can be out on Friday doing something else. I also be out at the weekend. But I think that has benefited the Rangers, and that's when you talk about, Nick, how's it worked. We actually physically are given instruction what we want, what is required, and if we're available, then we'll go out and do it. So we're the animals on the floor, if you might say, working and trying to help full-timers. And I think it is a help, really, in terms of help rather than being taking a job almost.
Yeah, no, yeah, thanks, John. And I think that's really important that the way that we've organised volunteers across the whole of the week. And, you know, some people say, well, there aren't as many volunteers out weekends. Well, okay, that's fine. But there are many more out in the week and doing the, or, you know, whether it's delivering the diverse audience plan or whether it's doing practical work on the trail. There's a whole range of opportunities there, you know, which is absolutely great. Inevitably, resources always constrain that as well. But yeah, that, I mean, I think that is a way forward. And Jess, who does a lot on the volunteering kind of organising side, training. You know, we've gone down this modular system where people can dip in. Because again, that's, you know, there's a difference in how volunteers can, availability as well. And if they can spread their training or do it on a modular basis and then do bits of what we want people to do, that gives everybody more opportunities. And that's the way we've tried to go, whilst kind of deliver all of those priorities, really.
Just to go back on that, Andy, the thing is that you've got people who are employed on full-time jobs. There are others like myself that are retired. So we've got every day and any day to do it, whereas the others, because they're working full-time, they'll do a full-time week's work and then go and volunteer a week. So it works both ways.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Andy. A straightforward question. We talked a lot about resources. How much have you lost, or what have you lost?
I've been told I couldn't say this. Well, let's give it a bit of perspective. When Crow came in 2004, we were given quite a lot more resources for rangers from the government, because obviously there was the concerns around what might happen under Crow. So within the team, I suppose, there are obviously a different range of teams across the park, and we have to acknowledge that. So obviously there's three and a half who work on our properties, more or less, perhaps 4 or 4. There's obviously there's Rangers Pay sitting under the communities team, kind of doing some of that education communities work, which our team do as well. But I suppose in the heyday of what you would call this team, the area team, when I started there were 22. So it's half.
I mean, I'd say just looking at the structure, I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense, and actually more sense from when I was around. That it seems to make, you know, more sense than what was, you know, there's a lot more clarity than what was there then, I think, really. I suppose another question is, we talk about these recreation hubs or whatever. I mean, is that a move back towards area management plans? Which were very good in my experience.
That was my question. Thank you.
No, it's moving forward, Jeff.
To quote Mike Rhodes, it's moving forward to area management plans.
Is that what they are? It is an area. I think the concept will be the same.
Yeah.
The delivery won't be the same because we just haven't got, again, we haven't got the resources that, John Thompson and the whole team that were kind of organised around that. So we haven't got the resources that. The concept about how we might organise our work with partners, and I must stress this, partners, because they have to be part of it, because they're part of the National Park Management Plan delivery. And that's really important because we can't do it ourselves. So that approach so we've drafted a very rough draft of a recreation plan for the Hope Valley, which is not the easiest thing in the world to do anyway. But a lot of it which is captured around our priorities, allied with sustainable transport, because that's absolutely crucial to these things, about how that works, and with a couple of other things. The question is, what is the envelope of that? And how wide, small do you go? Not just geographically, because that's important, but actually what things are you trying to influence? And because everything is under challenge for finances, it's how you best do that. So the concept, I suppose, is very similar. The delivery and what that may look like, I think, will be somewhat different.
And the range of partners, I think, will be quite different.
Yeah.
You know, the old area management scheme, Jeff, tended to involve large landowners and authorities, where I think the recreation hubs is going to involve much more local groups, charities and you know, local parish groups. So I think the ranges will be quite different, and the emphasis that brings will be different. So it's not exactly the same.
Yeah, well, just to say I commend it as an approach. I mean, some of the happiest times I had and some of the most successful times I had was being involved in the kind of Upper Derwent work, and we achieved a massive amount. And if what's talked about is an updating of that sort of thing, then it's you know, good luck. I think it's a very successful approach.
If only we had the resources that you had available then, Jeff.
So, actually, if I, just for kind of clarity, is that, so as the recreation hubs, it's not just how the access bit of the landscape and engagement team is working, is the FIPL team thinking in the same way, and the property team, or is it, how does that, I guess, so from a Standish perspective, when we're looking at a whole estate plan, we've got people from all different parts of the authority, whether it's property or transport or FIPL, or all working together on one plan. Is that the idea for these recreation hub approaches as well?
Yeah, kind of after a fashion. So, for example, so Richard's kind of doing quite a bit with the ranges. I suppose, so if you're looking at what are priority routes in that valley, okay, so how can you deliver that? Yeah. Can you deliver it through FIPL? Can you deliver it through this? Can you deliver it through that? How does that connect to the sustainable transport? There's an awful lot going on in the Oak Valley about sustainable transport, as you know. A lot of which we've got absolutely no control over whatsoever, but a lot of which local groups are involved with as well. And I won't say definitively this is what it's going to be like, because I don't think we're quite there yet. But the concepts around where those recreation hubs may be, which is an aspiration through to 2028, I think, in the National Park Management Plan, there's a bit of work to be done there. So, you know, as Jeff's kind of alluded to, there's you know, the Upper Derwent looks like that place where, you know, automatically you go back to some kind of recreation hub as well. But it does need partners to be, well, lead probably in that as well. And so that's the challenge. So I think there'll be, in terms, I suppose in addressing your question, there'll be a range of delivery mechanisms by which you may be able to deliver that recreation hub. Depending on what the priorities are, and how, you know, and the other part of it is, we might think, oh, that's a really good priority. We go to the farm and say, no, we're not doing that. Yeah. There's always that.
I think it just may be worth adding, echoing what Andy said though. Following the organisational change and the new structure just bedding in, we have to go back and just rethink this and review where we're going and then explore it with those. And I think it'll probably end up as quite a mixed model approach, right, because each circumstances locally are potentially quite different. I just thought it was worth adding. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it would be, I don't know if others agree, but at the point where there's as you get more clarity, it might be really useful for people to come back and actually present to us about how it's working and what the plans are. I mean, it probably sounds like something that's going to change and embed over time, but the more we can understand that, I think the better for us.
Yeah, it's definitely a developing feast, and as Sue said, you know, each model could look different, and there's a bit more of a thinking process to be made, to be gone through. It's about what it actually looks like.
So my other thought on this in particular is, we talked about the Green Lane strategy, and we've also talked about how you make sure that Staffordshire or Derbyshire or whoever are actually working on the kind of routes that we think are a priority or important. And this also then leads into talking about Jill's ROIT report as well. Obviously with Derbyshire, we did some work with them where they've identified some priority routes where they wanted our input, and we've given some guidance, and now we're monitoring and they're reporting back to us on that. And with the Green Lane strategy, we also had a sort of park-wide list of those green lanes where we knew at the time the Green Lane strategy was developed that were a priority in terms of illegal use and sort of needing work done to those. Some of that work has been done, some of those routes are now dealt with, some of them, maybe new issues have come up in different places. I guess where I'm getting to is that I think there's an important role for this LAF, and it's a role for each of us as individuals on the LAF as well as a whole LAF, is where we think there are priorities that we think the park should be working on, or Derbyshire should be working on, or whoever the responsible person is, but if it's within our area. I think it's probably important that we bring that to the group, that we maintain that list, and then we play that monitoring role. Because I think in the past the LAF has played a more active monitoring role on essentially just asking the question. If we think it's important and we're a group of stakeholders, then we have a role and a responsibility to go back to yourself or to Jess or to Michael or to Derbyshire to say, this route, there's some key issues here and we're keeping an eye on it. We want you to update us on it and keep the priority going on it. As Nick's just done, in fact, with the Transpennine Trail. So I'm not quite sure how we do that. I suspect it's going to be a mix and match of different things. Certainly we'll keep those annual meetings with Derbyshire going so that we meet with Rob and we go through that priority list with him. But it may be that we convene other groups and subgroups, site visits to actually look at those, perhaps looking again at illegal use and whether that has changed and looks a bit different from how it did when we originally brought that strategy up. And perhaps over the next year to support the team in that prioritisation. Martin, you look like you had a thought.
Just a thought, yeah. I think there's obviously a lot we can celebrate with National Park and Derbyshire, and I think all the user groups around this table, the amount put in. I think I should also mention the Peak and Northern Footpath Society. We are particularly lucky in this area to have two organisations, so they contribute a huge amount. I mean, we've got a functioning local access. And just a question for Jack at the back, just with your idea of your knowledge of England and Wales. I mean, from what you've heard today and things, how do you think we are, doing comparing to other parts of the countries for local authorities, right to way network, and also local access forums?
That's a big question, isn't it?
Martin, can you turn your microphone off? Sorry, I think.
That's all right. I think to be honest, it's difficult to say about the Highway Authority performance. One of the issues is there isn't a measure, right, of highway priority performance. I think the only thing I can sort of reflect upon is the fact that the LAF is functioning and effective is a standout thing compared to other places in the country. I think that is particularly noticeable. But we definitely see, the problem is it's all anecdotal. We definitely see significant issues with different highway authorities across the country, and my memory is that none of them are in this area, but there are some that I know stand out in my head. Is that helpful? I don't know if that's the sort of thing you're after, but the problem is we don't have there isn't best value performance indicator or anything like that for rights of way and highways anymore, which is an issue, I think.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions or thoughts on what we've heard from Andy, the role of us at the LAF? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. Yeah. And obviously we'll keep that conversation. That's kind of an opener almost. We'll sort of keep that conversation going in terms of where we see the priorities. What I will do, and in fact, Charlotte and I and Martin had a conversation about this before the meeting, is try to go back and look at where the LAF previously provided that monitoring role, and if there's anything that we've perhaps dropped that we need to pick up, and come back to just to make sure that we as a LAF are playing that monitoring role and also the input role for the team going forward. Which leads us nicely into, I think the next item is Jill,
It would do if Jill was hilly.
wouldn't it? Jill, you've changed.
Oh, sorry, coughed into the microphone. It's a real change. It's a real change. Jill can't be here. Shame Jill can't be here because I think her paper. I commend her paper to you. Hopefully, you've had a chance to read it. It does follow on very nicely from a lot of the conversations we've had today. The condition of Derbyshire County Council's Derbyshire's Rights of Way network is, I think, in very good hands at the moment, and from our perspective of the National Park, Derbyshire County Council are an excellent council to work with. I'm not going to go through the report line by line. There's an I'm not going to do that. Hopefully, you've had a chance to read the report. There's two key aspects, I think, which I think I'd like to highlight. One is about the roadside signposting. Martin mentioned this in his presentation. How important it is that people know that rights of way are there, and I think that came out of Jack's presentation as well. People need to know they're there, and we're trying to ensure with Derbyshire County Council that people are able to follow routes not only from the roadside but when they're wandering through the open country. And we try and ensure that any signposting that we do has destinations and distances involved as well. So I think certainly from my perspective, I've been working for this national park for over 30 years, and I'd say the roadside signposting is now in better condition than I've seen it in 30 years, I think. In Derbyshire. Derbyshire. The other important element of Jill's report is, I think, the surface condition and drainage work which is ongoing. Steve Hollingworth is leading this project and has provided a comprehensive list of works completed, works issued to contractor, and works forthcoming in 24-25. I hope you'll all have a chance to have a look through that and digest it, because it really is quite a phenomenal piece of work. And again, compared to the situation we were in 20 years ago, is completely different kettle of fish. Still some important works to come. I'm particularly keeping a close eye on what's happening at the head of Edale at Jacob's Ladder. Also some important bridleway works forthcoming as well, that we just need to keep in contact with Steve and Rob. So please have a look at that, and I commend the report.
Any comments from anyone? Jeff and then Charlotte.
I would just like to welcome and commend the kind of level of work that's going on and the investment that's happening, because that's not always been the case. And also pleased to see once again the White Peak loop is still kind of limping forward. Yes. And especially the link from link up into Buxton. I note that there's kind of various investigations going to take place, and I realise that's not going to be easy, but just once again support the proposed route through Rudale, and just really hope this can be achieved.
Thank you, Jeff. Who was next? It was Charlotte.
Again, I mean, an excellent report from Jill, and how much to celebrate in the work that Derbyshire are doing on the existing rights of way, making sure that it's in a state that works well for those who use it. I'd just like to highlight the AIM 2 definitive map and statement, Project 2026, which is the Lost Ways project. It says that there are 381 paths that have now been lodged on the Dobbin database for research records. So this is a database where you can attach information to historic maps. So if you're researching one route and you find something else, you can just create, and then others can take it forward to create a definitive map modification order. Of those 381, 206 DMMOs have now been submitted. I wonder how many of them will see the light of day within our lifetimes. And I think this is something that we should continue to highlight whenever we can, because this will give the connectivity, will give the expansion to the rights of way network, and it is very, very important that these things just don't languish. This isn't a criticism of Derbyshire County Council, it's a lack of resource that's put into this, and this is something that I think nationally we need to focus on, because we are not unique in this situation. I'm pleased to see that there's ongoing work on the Pennine Bridleway National Trail, and it's important that this again is not lost in the long grass, that we do make sure that this trail is complete, because it is an important national asset. A lot of money's been invested in it, and it just needs to be finished off. I would also like to highlight the Shallcross incline at Whaley Bridge, because they've used FlexiPave, and it's a very expensive material, but it is extremely useful on inclines because it's porous, so the water can run through it. And it will be interesting to see how this stands up over the years and whether it's going to be cost effective. But I think it's very nice that this experiment has been made, and it's certainly something that as a LAF we should be aware of, because it might be a solution to other difficult situations. So thank you.
Indeed.
Thank you, Charlotte. Martin.
Just on things happening in our lifetime, just on the White Peak Loop and things, great to see some movement. But I think Derbyshire County Council is going for a cycling, visions for a cycling network to do it. And cycling I find not very encouraging in Derbyshire. I live in Wirksworth and I have driven here yet again. I suppose I could have got the bus, but really I could have cycled, and certainly with an electric bike. It just seems to me. And the problem is the A6 and a bit through Matlock. We really ought to be doing so much more. I mean, just not only rights of way, bridleways and byways, but the general thing, we ought to be moving around by bike. We've just seen the flooding in the last couple of weeks going on. So yeah, commendable, but more to be done and more money needed.
Just see if anyone else has got comments, and then I'll come back to you. Anyone else? Jack, if you want to make a comment, please do.
Sorry, I don't know if it's appropriate for me to come in. I just thought I'd just give some context to the definitive map modification order backlog. We undertook a survey of local authorities towards the end of 2018, and at that point they had 4,000 applications in the backlog, and we did a slightly different survey, but we think still pretty robust recently, and it's about 10,000 now. Adept did a survey of their members as well, and they found that the oldest, the local authority with the biggest backlog on the current rate of processing them would take 130 years to process the ones they've currently got. And the average, I think, had about 20-year-old application in there. So I just wanted to, I know it doesn't help particularly the local situation, but it's very much something that the Ramblers and other access organisations, we think, if there's going to be a cut-off date for historic rights of way, for instance, which it looks like there now is, we're making the case that there needs to be investment in trying to sort that out, because that brings no one certainty if there's applications sitting there for 50, 60 years. But yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's something we've talked about before in terms of how slowly they're going through, and that making it through the backlog seems impossible. Thank you. Just a couple of comments from me on Jill's report, and then we'll come to Sue. In those routes to be funded, there are two, Hope Bridleway 32 and Bridleway 5, which is the one to Hope Cross, and Chapel Boat 144, which is Rush Up Edge, where I think it might be useful for us to talk to Derbyshire about potentially doing a site visit with a range of representatives from different user groups to chat to them about the options for the work. I know that's something that Derbyshire had expressed an interest in when we met them last year. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that sort of agreements?
I think we should. The Chapel Gate one, it was only probably 10 years ago that they
we should do.
Offer some input, yeah.
Any other thoughts? Agreement? Disagreement? Okay. Right, well, we'll talk to Derbyshire about organising that. Hopefully not in the snow this time. Oh my God.
Do it online.
We'll do it online. We'll get somebody to
Comfortably
walk around
living
with a
room.
camera.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and if there are any others on this list that people think actually a site visit would be useful, or if not a site visit, a kind of group conversation online with the Derbyshire team, we can set that kind of thing up really easily. Thank you. Sue, last but not least, ever.
Thank you. I've provided a short update on various access matters. I'm not going to be showing a presentation, but I've just got a slide with a few photographs on at the end. So there's no hurry, Mike. So the report I circulated provided an update on the mapping review, which links in with what we've both heard from Ben and the encouraging surveys by the Ramblers, and all this work that's been that's going on to keep the focus on Crow access land, how it's used, and how we improve access within that. And I also mentioned about the app that we've developed, or as Andy refers to it, it's now going to be known as the HAP. And this is, and in the paper I referred to the improved monitoring and recording of access. Now, this ties in really nicely with what we're saying about access land, because of course by going out and having a look at seeing what the current access is to access land, then we can start to think about how we improve accessibility. We can start to think about other access that's available on access land, but also linking in areas. And we're fortunate in the National Park to have the Farming in Protected Landscape scheme, which is allowing us to meet up with landowners and discuss with them about new routes that we can put in to identify that. And again, that links in with the Strava work that I mentioned earlier on, because heat maps have proved useful, as well as seeing what's happening on the ground, particularly if you have a broken wall or something, then that's when, and it's repeatedly where people are accessing, then landowners are often quite receptive to an access point potentially going in. When I say often, quite receptive, depending on the landowner. But as well as the app allowing us to monitor, get good condition of access land. From the recording side of things, it allows us to start to draw out and see how many different types of infrastructure there are. So how many are accessible, how many are gates and not stiles. It also allows us to take pictures as well. And record those, because again we know that a lot of people may struggle a little bit with confidence. Are they in the right place? What can they do on the land? Who's this for? So having a picture of an access point, it confirms that you're in the right place, and it supports the signage that we're updating when we're out and about as well. And one final thing on access land is that we'll be starting the reviews again of the directions on access land, which the Local Access Forum has been involved with over the last 15 years. So we'll be following up at the February forum meeting on that. The next item I put on was about a changing place. Now this is one of our accessible places, our accessibility hub. as it were, at Millersdale. A changing place is effectively a larger than standard accessible toilet. It includes additional facilities such as a changing table and hoist, and it makes a world of difference to some people. It means that they will travel to an area because they know that that facility is there. It also means that they can stay out longer in an area because that facility is there. So we're absolutely delighted that we've managed to get funding from a variety of different organisations, and this Friday the planning application will be considered at planning committee. So I hope at some point we can update you on that and let you know what's happening. Okay. In relation to the Access Fund, I've just given a very quick summary about the Peak District Foundation, and it's likely that the Local Access Forum will be having a further report on that. The Peak District Foundation supports the authority's Access Fund. And in 2023, as well as other conservation and access initiatives. And this year, the partnership has moved across to a more sustainable self-financing model, again, which they can tell you a bit more about. We're working closely together on the Access Fund and various initiatives. And early next year, we'll be looking at a couple of the larger Miles Without Styles projects, which the foundation did some funding for previously. And in relation to access improvements, well, we've had a number that have taken place in 2023 with funding from the Access Fund, funding from DEFRA's Access for All, and also the Farming in Protected Landscapes programme. I've circulated with my paper a media update and a summary relating to the Access for All and the FIPL programmes. The media update. Well, you've heard before from me that Miles Without Styles takes over 10% of all our web traffic to the Peak District National Park. But there's other initiatives that we delivered with the Access for All funding, such as Peak District Trampers. So there's new information on that. And shortly, within this next month, we'll be rolling out Accessible Castleton as well. So there'll be more information on that. In terms of FIPL, similarly, excellent stats, and we included those. So we're getting new permissive paths. Upgraded routes, educational access, 17 projects making landscape more inclusive, 18 projects involving volunteers, and there's a bit of information about it on that. And behind me, I've done some before and afters. So over here, this is really excellent. So the before and afters are all funded by the authorities, by the National Parks Access Fund, of which the Local Access Forum are a keen supporter. This is at Fernley Reservoir in the Goyt. Very, very difficult access, and not now. So series of steps and rails. We couldn't ramp it and make it suitable for disabled access, just purely because of the steepness of the slope, and there was just no other possibility. But what this has allowed is a circuit of Fernley Reservoir in the Goyt, and we're getting some excellent feedback. I feel that we should shout a little bit more that the National Park Authority's in-house team, the Countryside Maintenance team, did the work on this. I feel also we should shout out a little bit more about that it's public donations that have enabled that. So that's why I'm telling you all about it. The middle one, that's at the bottom of Long Causeway on Stanage. This was a team that Peak Park Conservation volunteers took out. There were, I think, at least one, possibly two wheelchair users. So it was nice that that we had. Well, miles with this long causeway route, the bottom part of the route, we're going to be taking it forward as a miles without stiles. We did some work on it under the DEFRA Access Fund, and we wanted to tidy it up, but also at the same time we widened the access at each side. So they thoroughly enjoyed doing that work, and the DEFRA Access Rules programme allows us to consider whether there's any materials or equipment to help volunteers or to help volunteering available for everyone. And finally, this is Crowdycut, and it's taking out we've taken out both the ladder styles now and put in these kissing gates. Which makes access a whole lot easier, particularly when ladder styles start to get dilapidated. Anyone who's gone out with a small child and a dog and negotiated ladder styles will struggle. And as we speak, the team, Countryside Maintenance Projects team, are out at Surprise View. Surprise View was another route. That's going to be one of our newest miles without stiles route. It was put in by the DEFRA Access for funding. There was some washout with Storm Babette, so I'm really pleased that they're able to get out so quickly on that one and to sort out a bit of washout on the surfacing. Also tomorrow we're going out to Kingsdale. Now again, that was a bit more shocking after the storm the other week. That miles without stiles route is closed. The team are going out. They're going to carry out some short-term measures. We'll be able to fund that using the Access Fund, but we'll also need to be looking at more comprehensive repairs for that. And this is why we work very closely in partnership with highway authorities. And why we look at different forms of funding. And I have made a note, Jack, about the Ramblers Accessibility Fund. I think we could probably spend your annual.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
Me and Sue raised eyebrows.
I wrote it down.
Yeah. And then finally, how we managed to pay for a lot of the maintenance on Miles Without Stiles routes and deliver new ones. There are, of course, donations to the Access Fund, but also at the same time we sell the Miles Without Stiles handbook. So I'm going to bring a box down at lunchtime, and if anyone wants one, again, as we've said before, all information is available on our webpage, peakdistrict.gov.uk MWS, because we want to provide welcome for everyone, so therefore every route has to be freely accessible. But the handbook allows us to plough back every penny of that £5.95 into the Access Fund that we can then put towards new access improvements.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you. Any questions, comments?
Just a quick count for the staff, Sue. Just ballpark.
It was about 9,000.
Martin?
Sue, thanks very much. The Fipple thing, I was up at Crestbrook and walked the Fipple path up from Haybrook up to Great Longston. So absolutely great route. Be great if it's actually in perpetuity. Just a comment on the style and the gate. I like the hard surface. I was just reading my British standards on stiles. It's ground within 2 metres of the structure, be free of surface water and provide a firm surface, which I didn't know. If you come across feeders and troughs, would you talk to landowners if they're next to stiles or near to stiles? Is that part of the park to talk to landowners on moving them away?
It's generally good practice and it is encouraged in British standards and other guidance and by the NFU and CLA to not have feeders at access points into a field and on public rights of way. So yes, if we come across it, we can certainly flag up with landowners. But again, this is a role for the highway authorities as well, and their officers.
Thank you, Sue. Any other comments, Charlotte?
On the FIPL funding and the concession rights of way, are the concessions just in place while the FIPL funding's there, or do you think there's a reasonable chance that they will continue, even if they are concession routes rather than dedicated?
Yeah, we flagged this up at the time of the contract, that the payment under the current schemes is just for a set period. Now the benefit at the moment is that it's almost like a foot in the door, I think with this. So some landowners who might not be that sure about access, it's a way for us using FIPL to say, well, let's try it out and see how it goes. They have maintained contact with the national park to pick up on issues. So it might be a case of going back and carrying out works to the gate. It might be some additional signage to help people follow a route, and there's been quite a lot of involvement that we have with permissive routes. We have said to them that if the funding finishes, then we can look to support them with future maintenance via the National Parks Access Fund. And a lot of landowners, I think, are quite receptive to the idea of the access continuing. We found that under countryside stewardship and the schemes from that, there were quite a few where the landowners were keen to work with us and continue. And if you look at the back of the handout that I gave on the Farming and Protected Landscapes scheme up at Minninglow, access to Minninglow was a stewardship scheme, and that access has been maintained. And in actual fact, the landowner there has then said, okay, we'll have a look at putting an additional access route lower down. They know that they're only going to get funding for a few years, but similarly, they know that they're only committed to that for a few years. Both these reports, I thought they were really good reports, and I wanted to share them wider, because we provided them to DEFRA, the DEFRA access team, when they came out at the beginning of August, and we met up with them on the trail out at Minninglow, and we're talking through the FIPL scheme, and we're talking through the idea of permissive access.
Okay. Thank you, Sue. Any other comments or questions before we close? Okay. Thank you, Sue. Thank you. We didn't have any member updates or any other business submitted before the meeting. Does anybody have any quick ones they want to share with everyone now? No. In that case, I guess I just wanted to say it's kind of amazing how much, I am constantly amazed, but particularly today, how much knowledge and how much commitment and kind of passion for access and everything that we do there is in the room today. So I wanted to thank all of you for all of your contributions and thoughts and insights. Our next meeting is on the 21st of February. And Oh yes, which we've seen maybe actually something you talked about earlier, which is the view of land managers on these broader access issues and some of the challenges that poses. So the earlier conversation we had about farmers and right to roam and those kinds of things, that may be the theme that we pull out for next month, but February. And I think we'll also we'll confirm the dates of the June and the autumn meeting as soon as we can, so you can all get those into your diaries. But that's it. Just remains thanks again to Jack for coming up for the meeting. Lunch is in the garden room, I think.
Hope so.
Is it? Excellent. And yeah, thanks everybody, and see you in February.